You've got quite the episode for folks today. Jace Dees is something else, isn't he?
I mean, he's incredible.
I think folks are going to hear so many stories. We cover the shop floor, supply chain, machine to machine, AI, change management. I have a hard time picking a favorite part. I don't know if anything stands out to you.
I mean, I can't say that I could pick a favorite part from those, but there's an overarching theme to me that's just phenomenal. You know, when you meet people like Jace in business, they're inspiring because not only are they just, like we just said, operational efficiency is just at his core, and that, you know, that understanding, but just his pure innovative and visionary approach to the things that he does. He's not afraid to push those boundaries and just get past it. And these are the people that change our industries.
You know, that word innovation, it's like so many people talk about it instead of just doing it. And I kept thinking that as Jace was talking, there's this story that folks will hear in a moment where, you know, he had to take a factory and transition them from high volume to low volume, high mix, and get new technology. He had to go get a vendor and say, do something that's never been done. And he doesn't even mention at any point, like, I was going to bring new technology into the organization or do industry 3.0, 4.0. He's just like, here's the business problem. It was just so evident that he like tackles it the right way. And I try to ask him, like, you must have had some opposition. And, you know, I don't know, that part just really struck me, just from story to story. You know, people like Jace, how he's done it, such an example to follow of like just being completely in tune with what the true challenges are, the business cases, and pulling technology instead of pushing it into the right places throughout his whole career.
His recollection on the details of how he navigated each of these, I mean, like we just said a minute ago, it's a masterclass in operational technology. Or operational strategy. It's just, I think it's incredible to see the amount of things that he's taken on, no matter the complexity, and succeed. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, let's not hold people back. Let's get into it. All right, today we are excited to have Jace Dees join us. Jace is a seasoned executive with over 25 years of experience, having held senior leadership positions at Benchmark, Flextronics, Jabil, Amazon, now Kimball. He's been a global change agent leading transformations in operations, supply chains, IT systems across North America, Europe, and Asia. Jace has driven significant operational optimizations, site relocations. He's maintained a focus on Lean Six Sigma principles, talent development, broad experience across the board. Really excited to speak with him. His experience spans Fortune 500 companies and complex projects in EMS, making him uniquely positioned to speak about the future of operations and AI in manufacturing. Jace, thanks for coming to the show.
No, I appreciate that, Andrew. Very excited to be part of it and maybe share some insights and questions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off. Could you share in your words some about your journey in electronics manufacturing and how your role has evolved over this series of amazing companies in the past 20, 25 years?
Yeah, I started out, years ago in the early 80s in circuit boards, printed circuit board manufacturing. Had my own company for a few years where I was a manufacturer's rep for electronics, electromechanical assembly, and circuit cards. Saw where the industry was going back in the 80s for greater outsourcing, and the EMS industry was starting to blossom. So that's kind of what got me into the EMS world. And once you're kind of hooked in it, it's there's so much diversity and change and excitement, in an EMS environment where there's no day, it's going to be like the day prior.
Yeah.
And that's what really drew me to it, is that, the pace of change, the pace of innovation, the diversity of opportunity and challenge, there's nothing like it. So that kind of got me into it. I kind of grew from my own company, sold it off after a few years, got into EMS, started working for Jabil. And with Jabil, I was a program manager when I first started out. And then they said, hey, Jace, you're doing a reasonably good job. Why don't we give you a business to run? So they gave me a business opportunity, which was extremely high mix and very low volume type manufacturing. Jabil at the time was high volume, low mix, building for Dell and HP and some of those folks. And so I had this piece of business and I said, there's a different way we can approach this. And how we need to approach it is looking at a different view of automation, collecting data, looking machine to machine and the architecture of the machines. And how can we use the intelligence of the machine in the operational side? And they said, hey, wow, Jace, we've never done that. I think it's not going to be able to be done. I said, okay, fine, give me a shot. And they said, great. Great thing about Jabil is they're all about innovation. And so they gave me the opportunity, and we took one surface mount line, and we were able to run 480 different assemblies every month off one surface mount line.
Wow.
which usually they're running 10 to 30 in a high volume manufacturing environment off a surface mount line. So they thought that was phenomenal. Also, it was able to afford us the opportunity to kind of get into different markets that we traditionally didn't play in. So that kind of gave me the opportunity, and we were successful at it. We tripled the operating income that was traditional for the company with this model, which was really nice. Traditional was about 5%. We were doing 18% operating income. So that was pretty significant. And they said, great, we have this new business that we want you to run. It's about $250 million. It's taking 4 manufacturing sites out of Nortel and trying to integrate it into Jabil. So, and again, looking at it from Malaysia, US, both San Jose, Mexico, and St. Pete, and trying to integrate the manufacturing out of and transfer products from Nortel, multiple different locations in Nortel, Bay Networks was one of them, into Jabil. So did that, was very successful in doing the transition, not without pain, but of course did the transitions. They said, great, did a good job there. Hey, we got this other little account called Cisco, and it was the largest account within Jabil at the time, about 480 million bucks. And they said, hey, can you take that over? And I said, sure. And I said, let's go meet with the folks over at Cisco. So we went down and met with them. And the very first meeting, they said, hey, Mark Mundello at the time was the COO. And they said, Mark, if we don't fix this in 6 months, we're firing you as a company. I said, thanks, Mark, for the introduction.
That was serious.
Yeah, that was serious. So, I was fortunate enough to have some great people at Cisco to work with. And, they were very, I was well coached, let's just say, on some of the challenges, pulled the team together, really focused on the integration of B2B, right? And so that was one thing that really helped transform the business. Is there were some operational things we needed to fix. We fixed it. But then that integration of the B2B and having, kind of a truly an extension of one factory, if you will, we moved the Cisco systems, Oracle systems on premise to Jabil. We did the direct fulfillment with Jabil. Again, we did some really innovative things at the time in supply chain, as well as IT integration, sharing information, and having real-time information. That really transformed the relationship. We got Supplier of the Year in 1 year, and in 3 years, we grew the business to 1.2 billion. So not bad.
I just want to highlight there's like 3 amazing journeys here. So the first one, they gave you this plant and you said it was mainly about high volume, and you had to go for higher mix, and so you massively transformed how many different products you were able to run, and you had to at that point really think about technology to create more flexibility. And then I think your second example was being able to shift production to other places and use technology to do that. And then your third with the small company Cisco, kind of, it sounded like IT level integration with the factory and the warehouse and the supply chain to be able to really grow and serve that top customer in a better way.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that Cisco is having is being able to, and they were a control freak, like most large OEMs, and they needed to be able to have visibility into your supply, what was on supply, looking at the whole make to sell process, and understanding what your costs were, understanding where they're going to add value. So it's really a core, non-core type of analysis we did up front, and looking at where we add value, where they add value, where they have IP, where we have IP, and kind of really mapping that out as a joint organization. And the way I like to look at things is I start at the customer, work backwards, right? If I'm not satisfying the customer, delighting the customer, I'm failing. So that's kind of how I looked at it with my team. And I surveyed all 12 divisions at Cisco. So I went out there, spent about 3 weeks talking to each one of the leaders of those different divisions, and brought back with that kind of a SWOT diagram, right? And said, hey guys, this is my team. This is kind of where I see we're positioned. These are some of the challenges. And then collectively, we came up with a strategy on how we're going to approach the business. Some hard decisions where, Cisco wanted prototypes in California. Unfortunately, with prototypes in California at my site in San Jose, they were too close to it. So they came in and changed things on the fly. We would accommodate changes, yet however that was communicated back to the supply chain folks never happened. So what ended up happening is that our scorecards on on-time delivery and then expectations for turnaround and responsiveness was affected. So I said, I'm going to take it back to the mothership, which is St. Pete, and said, I have better resources there. I have a lot of common material because I was doing about $120 million out of St. Pete. I said, I have the infrastructure. I'm going to put a dedicated surface mount line in so I can have quicker response, dedicated resources, all these things. And that'll improve your customer sat. And they said, but I want to be able to walk down the street and get it the next day. I said, you'll get it overnight. I'll finish it. I'll ship it overnight. You'll have it in the morning every time. And that one little change was transformational, right? So it's understanding the customer needs, understanding how am I going to service those needs, and then managing perception of the customer, right? And understanding that through each one of those business units, there were some aha moments, and so a little bit of pushback at first, and we said, great, we'll take the pushback, take the heat short term, but I'll prove to you in the long term. And so it paid off, right? A little luck, a lot of hard work, it paid off.
Very cool. It's fascinating. So I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago when you said, I got in this industry because I kind of like that element of change. It's not the same from day to day or week to week. And I love that about this industry. And it's obvious that you know how to innovate. and you've been in change management and for a long time. I want to talk about that a little bit more. What are some of the key challenges that you've faced in managing? You've managed across many regions, right? So, what are some of the key challenges you've faced in managing global operations? How did innovation help you to address some of those? And maybe more importantly, how do you see AI posed to accelerate it going forward?
Yeah, so great question. Thank you. First thing, when I look at disparate cultures and I look at the different regions, challenges that we have, first thing is standardization. Are we all talking about the same language? Are we talking about the same processes, the same approach? So that when we go off and we deploy and do product transitions and things like that, you're not reinventing the wheel. Then you got to look at how you're going to be able to take that standardization and scale it. So the other thing you got to look at as you're moving product or you're bringing up new product in different regions is, is there any kind of hidden factory in a transition site? So the other thing is you're going to have to go and live at the site that the product is being moved from, whether it's internal to a Jabil site or OEM to Jabil or any EMS. You really need to look at what you're doing from a layer or a last article inspection. And so you go in and you really decompose all the information associated with the product to try to extract the hidden factory. Right. And as you decompose this in a very methodical way, and I kind of default to some of the aerospace and defense approaches, as well as looking at some of the FDA 1345 and things like that. You're doing a 9102. A 9102 is basically decomposing every element of a manufacturing process and the product and making sure that you're capturing all that. Hey, John had these notes from 3 years ago in a binder. That's how he's building the product. Right? Or somebody else, Jane's been on the product doing some very complex diag, RF product, and she just has this tribal knowledge. Great case in point. I was looking at gyro and transitioning a gyro remanufacturing from Honeywell, and the way that they measured and did a gyro calibration is that the person was so skilled and has done it so long, they could hear the harmonics. So this thing is spinning up to 80,000 RPM, and they have their hand on the table next to the gyro, and they're listening and feeling the vibration on the table with their hand, and they know what to do. How do you transfer that know-how, right? And that is really key in looking at ways to transfer. So that's one way to transfer. You got to look at be able to scale it, right? Do you have and repeatable, right? So how do you standardize operations, scale it, and make sure that it's sustainable. So through a very rigorous methodology or method, that's how you kind of do it. If I look at AI and I look at how you can use that is prior, when I was kind of going up in the industry, everything was paper, right? The ability to kind of be able to look at trends, look at opportunities to take information from multiple sites, get trends on design issues. Knowledge is power, of course, right? And the really cool thing about AI and big data and taking metadata or disparate information, aggregating it to make sense out of it, is it illuminates knowledge and it illuminates all these things that me as a person trying to look at a spreadsheet on 3 different monitors. And if you saw my desk right now, I have 3 34-inch monitors, right? Because I'm a spreadsheet freak. But, if you have a tool that can disseminate, extract, and provide intelligence from, kind of what doesn't look like intelligible information, that's the magic, right? That's where I see things going.
I wish that I'd had, AI running to capture that whole thing. And then sometimes I was thinking about that, but I couldn't. Let's actually pop up. Let me see if this works. Oh, okay. Hey, ChatGPT, join the conversation for just a bit. I'm sorry you missed this amazing description that Jace gave about how to tackle challenges in manufacturing, but he mentioned a couple things: last article inspection, FDA 1345, and a 9102. That, some things people might not have heard about. What are a few of those?
Thanks for having me. Let's dive into those terms. Last article inspection is a quality check process where the last item produced in a batch is inspected to ensure it meets the required standards. FDA 1345 probably refers to ISO 1345, a standard for quality management systems specific to the medical device industry.
So if I hadn't been, following along and I hadn't time to go look up, that's one of the things you talked about. I was thinking about, you talked about the gyro calibration. I think it was a Honeywell example maybe, and how in the final test, the person would just hear the harmonics or touch the vibration on the table, and that level of tacit knowledge that's stuck in people's heads, right? And there's all these terms and all this language. And so AI, like you said, is helping us understand trends and aggregate and predict where things are going. And then it's also helping us synthesize information and extend our own knowledge faster in a really cool way too. So I want to ask you more about that really soon, but I guess not to get too far ahead. One of the things I was just thinking about this whole time while you were talking, you were describing these amazing technologies, the stuff that a lot of people still haven't done today. And you've been doing it for so long and driving it. And I'm thinking Jace must have faced a lot of opposition, right? And one of the major oppositions that people have is it's too expensive. It takes too long. The integration, like IT and OT can't talk together. So maybe on one hand, you could talk about IT integration and that as a specific hurdle, but maybe more broadly too, just what sort of, you make it sound easy that you've done all these things and it's amazing and you've been doing it for a while, but you must have faced opposition when you were proposing these new technology ideas.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of heavy lifts in anything that you do, right? The first thing is you kind of have to have the vision, right? And then the purpose. So I always look at vision, purpose, and plan, right? So when I go off and I say, what are we trying to achieve? Start at the customer, work backwards. What are the obstacles we're trying to achieve or break down the barriers? Then I say, okay, great. Here's kind of the vision of what we need to do. Here's today's state. Here's what we need to do today. But how do we get there? Right. So when I looked at the SMT line, going back to the example of going from high volume, low mix to high mix, low volume.
Yeah.
I looked at the equipment that I had, and at the time it was Fuji. And I asked Fuji, hey, can I have a system where I can take a PLD or a program logic device, be able to read a barcode, pick up a program, change a programmer on the fly, and transfer information from machine 1 to machine 2? And they said, no, we can't do that. I went to Universal and said, Universal, this is my vision. They said, I think we can do that. I said, great. Partnered with Universal, and they helped me break down that barrier, right? So there was, again, I had the vision. We had a vision of where we needed to go, how we needed to get there, and what the benefit it would provide. And my vision was lot size 1. I wanted to be able to do a single setup, to be able to run lot size 1. And at the time, our average, changeover surface mount line from one product to the other was somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. My goal was 10 minutes. We ended up achieving 6.5 minutes.
It's incredible. If I could jump into I know we have some people that are listening to this who are thinking about inside their own company. So in this example, you went to Fuji and they're like, not possible yet. And you went to Universal. And so you were driving these technology providers to be better. But what about inside of your own company? Were people, did you have a reputation at that point that people just said, let them try? Or would people push back on you when you were proposing these kinds of ideas?
Well, what was kind of cool about, all the opportunities that I was afforded, and, very grateful for those opportunities, obviously. They moved me from doing, running the businesses to running the Americas. So I ran operations for the Americas, which is 12 sites, US, Mexico, and Brazil for Jabil. Also, from that, we were kind of looking at saying, hey, you guys did a really good job in the high mix, low volume model. At the time in the 90s, manufacturing was going offshore, right? So it was going out of the US. So what was US going to be, and how are they going to transform the sites in the US from high volume manufacturing to high mix manufacturing?
Yeah.
So they said, hey, let's put you over to ops. And the first thing I did was laying the foundation at the different sites, both in Mexico, Brazil, and the US, on what is needed and what's the mindset and approach for high mix, right? There's two different elements. There's the equipment set and how you have to approach the operational in a mindset. And the second thing is, how do you go set up your supply chain and planning? So those are two different elements you got to kind of really step back and look at. So we were able to go off and do that for a while, for a few years, and got the kind of operations set up so that we were able to be prepared to execute high mix. And they said, okay, great, Jace, why don't you move into supply chain? Well, at the time, it was more business development. So they put me as a VP of VP of supply or business development for the Americas. So there, what I was doing is saying, okay, how is it that we're supposed to cost it? What's the resources needed for selling it? And how does the business unit need to look like for high mix, low volume, which is different than the other, right? And all those cost structures associated with it are way different than you would see in a high volume. So kind of had a number of about 100 different business units reporting to me, and kind of had to restructure how we did our quotes, how we did our business unit setup and our P&L. Right. So I worked with my finance team and worked with my, very, very astute business folks. And we created and won about $750 million for the business of new business. Okay. Then we started, kind of rolling that in, and we've seen some pretty challenging times with supply chain. So they said, Jace, we're moving you over to supply chain. So then I was vice president of the Americas for supply chain. How are we going to re-engineer? How are we going to rethink and innovate our supply chain and do development of supply chain with VMI models, bonding inventory models, XXX? So they moved me over there. I looked at that and said, what we really need to be able to do is set up a model where I can take my planning inputs, run it through our SAP at the time, and give an output to my partners, my distribution partners, be able to have visibility on bonded inventory and have a virtual warehouse that the inventory wasn't sitting on my books, but sitting at the supplier. So I not only can do my planning based on inventory bonded for me at multiple different suppliers, I was able to do an ATP or a commit against that, and then JIT material in, or just in time material in. So my inventory turns, we actually went from about 4 turns to 7.5 turns.
7.5. Wow.
Yeah. For a high mix business, that wasn't too shabby. So, really working again with partners and said, how do I take and use the, whether it's EDI or a portal system, how do we get data in, be able to share data real time and make decisions on data? I also had Jabil information systems that reported to me when I was doing supply chain. So I then could modify the tools and systems internal to Jabil to be able to get this information in, disseminate the information, and then be able to absorb it and make intelligence out of it. So that was kind of cool, because I had about 13 development engineers working for me doing that. So it was fun. I didn't used to have gray hair. At least I still have it.
There you go.
I actually want to follow up on that a little bit, Jace. I think that for anybody that's listening, it's probably pretty clear that you're an operational master. And I think on top of that, it's pretty clear to me that you're a master innovator as well. So I want to talk about that again for one more second. If you're to look back, I can hear you talking about, the optimization of supply chains and how you leaned into that. If you were to look back over the most impactful innovations in supply chain management that have shaped the electronics manufacturing industry over the past decade or two, would you say, is it, digital twins to simulate and optimize? Is it demand sensing technology? What do you think are the biggest, what do you think are the most impactful innovations so far?
Sense and control is definitely it, right? And taking data and trying to get in front of it. So if I look at supply chain, I look at risk in the supply chain, being able to take big quantities of data and get information and be able to provide a risk analysis on supply chain. I did run an aerospace and defense group for Meggitt also, which it was power generation, power conversion. If you look at that and you look at, okay, how do I safeguard my supply chain? And if you look at aerospace and defense, aerospace in particular, when you design a product, it usually takes from design to airworthiness about 7 to 10 years, right? If you look at the average life cycle on a component, it's about 7 years, right? So they'll pick apart, and before you are even in production, it's already obsolete. And oh, by the way, you got to support it for 27 more years. So how do you take and you look at it and say, how do I take my AML, approved manufacturers list, my supply chain, and make it resilient? Right. And the ability to use data and even artificial intelligence now. So if I look at some of the tools out there that I take a bill of materials and within minutes now, where before it had to be manual, I can see point of origin. Right. So we look at tariff and what's happening now with China and tariffs. I can take 1,000 line items and within several minutes, I can know where every component was original manufacturer. So then I could look at and say, okay, against that, where are all my alternate supply base? And there say, I'm going to resource out of China, save my 25 to 50% tariff, and move it into Thailand or move it into Vietnam or move it elsewhere. That's the power of AI. That's the power of intelligence. That's tangible, it's real, and it's monetary.
And I think it becomes even more important when, supply chains get stressed like they did over the last few years. I had a friend at one point tell me, coming out of, all the shutdowns, I'm having to make buying decisions on parts 24 months out. It's so stressed right now. I'm having to buy parts for 24 months from now that we're going to use. It's a guess. Hopefully you've got good technologies to good data foundations under you to make some of those decisions.
Yeah. And the other thing that's kind of cool is that you can take that data and you can also look at what are the design inflection points for in aerospace or medical or other. There's going to be certain inflection points we're going to do planned upgrades. And you can predict, okay, if I have a planned upgrade in 6 years, what's my entire population of components? And at that 7-year point, how many are going obsolete or are obsolete? How can I then go and start designing now new components in that'll keep that continuity of supply going without me spending, an incredible amount of money? Honeywell, for instance, at one point in time, they had $178 million of inventory just to cover obsolescence. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Boeing requires you to support their platform until 5 planes are flying in the world. Think about that.
Wow.
That's ominous.
Incredible.
Jace, can I bring you back to the shop floor again? I wanted to ask you about the role of Lean Six Sigma and continuous improvement, and both how you've seen it. How has it played a role in your past projects? And then how do you see AI evolving the way that continuous improvement and, Six Sigma type initiatives are done in the future?
In that area in itself, right? Lean covers a very broad spectrum, right? So it's, the 6S all the way into, basically elimination of waste. The one thing that, if you look at Dakota, that is where you look at machine defect detection, right? And that's where it's really getting exciting. Right. So it's be able to, if you look at Lean and Six Sigma and you do a DMAIC approach, which is define, measure, analyze, implement, and control. Right. First thing you need to do is be able to, what are you trying to get information for? What are you measuring? How do you measure it? Right. That alone right there, and where we are being able to extract information, not only from an endpoint data, which is kind of looking a little bit in the rearview mirror. What you want to be able to do is take that information out of the equipment real time. Right. And be able to have prediction on what's happening real time with the machines. Because when machines drift, what they do drift, right? You're looking always in the rearview mirror saying, guess what? That machine drift and I just had how many defects that I created? Versus saying, I'm detecting drift. I'm detecting an issue. And you proactively stop it. You fix it before you create a defect. That's where it's going. That's what's magical. All that's fun stuff. Six Sigma, you got to be able to measure. That's all what Six Sigma does is kind of measuring variance, upper and lower control limits, make sure you're always in control. The magic of that is now taking that Six Sigma to a level of which we could never do prior, right? There's no way that I could have historically, going back 5-10 years ago, look at machines, detect when a feeder is starting to get out of calibration or starting to drift and be able to understand what I need to do. Now I can. Also, the other thing that's really cool is I can now take disparate activities. So I look at SMT, I look at wave solder, I look at ICT or functional, Now I can connect all those dots and take issues that I see at one location and be able to trace that back into where the root of the defect was created and why.
Absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah. No, that's transformative. It's one of the powerful things about this technology. It's automated root causing, and that can happen on a single line and even on multiple lines or on components of parts in the future. You and I chatted about that a little bit in like aerospace, like how powerful that could be. You were alluding to the Boeing examples before.
There's so much stuff you can get out of this. It's really fun. Then you also take the DFX information. So if you go in and you look at a design,
Yeah.
and you take the Valor information or whatever CAD software you have, and you kind of extract out the opportunity for defects. Now you correlate that data back into what you're seeing on the equipment and what you're seeing on the ICT and functional. And now you have direct one-to-one correlation from design to manufacturability to testability.
Hey, ChatGPT, you listening in?
Absolutely, I'm here and ready to jump in.
So Jace was just talking about, in a manufacturing context, taking the data from DFX, DFM, and trying to understand root causes of defects, looking at ICT, functional test. How do you see AI can be used with all this data to figure out new things?
AI can be a game changer in manufacturing, especially with data from DFX, designed for excellence, DFM, designed for manufacturability, ICT, in-circuit testing, and functional tests.
It knows its acronyms. Oh, I cut it off. I didn't realize the new AI doesn't want to get interrupted now. I'm gonna have to improve my behavior a little bit.
Relationship
Anyway.
management, Andrew. Now you know.
I'm sure it had a good answer. Yeah, I should have let it keep going, but yeah, nonetheless, totally exciting. Agree on those things.
All right, I want to jump in on one if that's all right. We're talking about, DFM, DFX, all of the areas where we know data is already incredibly powerful. Talk about a little bit when we've talked a few times about the amount of relocation and change management that initiatives that you've undertaken in your career to this point. It's interesting as I look across these areas. These are areas where I see AI really well suited to provide a huge lift going forward. But I actually want to ask you your thoughts on that. If you look ahead at the future of AI and generative AI in particular, are you skeptic? Are you optimistic? Somewhere in between? How are you feeling about it?
No, I mean, I'm very optimistic on AI, especially for the manufacturing world. I think it's on the cusp of being used, right? So it's, the renaissance period for operations, right? So when you start using this big data and you start to look at, all the different variables that happen in both, not only internal to your plant, but then moving it, items to another location, being able to capture all that information internally, be able to have it in a cloud environment where other people can share it and download and be able to get rich information, meaningful information is key. When I look at transitions, some of the challenges, of course, with transitions is, one, you got to have the right teams on both sides. It needs to be a pull system. It can't be a push system, right? Doing the layers and fares. Like we talked about the last article inspection, first article inspections. That's making sure you have an output and inputs that are exact. And then, having the, like I said, clear roles and responsibilities for both parties, ownership on the receiving side. You got to have the frequent check-in points. A very set cadence on review and looking at from a management review board, what is those escalation points? And then how are you going to have that review to make sure everything happens flawlessly, right? Communication is key on any transition. Over communication is probably what you need, right? And then trust your people. It's all about people.
Yep. It's one of the areas that I think we're finding it incredibly powerful across every industry. When you were talking about, relocations and doing those things, how communication is so important. This is one of the areas I think AI is phenomenal in addition to, the prescriptive and the predictive elements that can come of it when you have the right, digital twins in place. Just the human element in being able to have translation that's quality, good translation to enable that communication and to enable the transfer of that information from those experts in local language. I think that's just one of the phenomenal areas that AI provides a ton of opportunity for us.
Yeah. And also I think, one of the areas that I would look for is that if I have product running in a particular location, I know that I'm going to move it, having, that kind of AI and be able to probe information remotely. So I would have, looking forward, a receiving site, even though if it may be in Vietnam or Thailand or wherever, They have an application on their phone.
Mhm.
They can query real time as products currently being manufactured. As you start to plan for transition, they can start getting a feel real time of what that product, how it runs, the issues you have well before it ever hits your floor. So when it hits your floor, you've already seen how that runs real time somewhere else in the world. That to me is, heaven.
Yeah. And anything that they pick up in that process that might be a mess that those experts are picking up that hasn't been, they can notify that into the system. Again, AI can translate it. It can put it back into the algorithm. It can feed it into other sites that then the expertise gets transferred across the entire organization.
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm working on a process program where I'm looking at data and trying to understand, where is the defect being created and driving it back to the individual operator by CRD or component reference designator. So if I look at defects coming off of ICT or functional, it's like, okay, I have a short, I have an open or reverse polarity or whatever.
Yep.
I can now look at it and say, okay, it was created at this area in the manufacturing floor, and this particular person did it. And now I can take a look at not only that defect for the assembly, but now kind of zero in on that person and how many defects is that person creating.
Yep.
Right? That's really powerful for me. So now I can either look at, is my visual aids correct? Are they too wordy? Especially when you go from US to abroad and you look at the manufacturing instructions, a lot of times people just transfer manufacturing instructions, but they don't always translate very well. So you want to be able to have more pictures, more of a picture tells 1,000 words, as well as being able to capture and say, okay, maybe our instructions weren't good for this particular operator. Let's go fix it. Never indict the operator. If the operator continues to make errors, then what is it that we didn't train them right on? Right? And if we go through the series of making sure that we're providing all opportunity for success, and the operator still is just not making, maybe in the wrong spot, right? And then we got to make a change. But that kind of information that can take you from good to great.
I love that quote, never indict the operator. And you're just straight to, how do I empower them better? How do I give them the right tools and right information? Maybe one more question here before we go to the rapid fire. Just when you think about generative AI, where are you on the dial of skeptic to optimist right now, and why on this new AI specifically, the chat GPT type?
I am optimistic, right? Everybody thinks that, oh my God, AI is going to change the world. It's going to take over. Cyborgs are going to come in, blah, blah, blah. I think it's an enabler, right? I think it's really around what we do with it. And it's not destructive in any way, shape, or form. I think it's going to provide information that is taking big data and rationalizing big data into meaningful and actionable items. And that's what AI is going to be really powerful for.
Yeah, examples you gave of the defect correlations back and arming the operators, combining the unified data in the right way with AI can be transformative.
I've said it before, AI, it's, what do they say? To quote something to the similar, like AI might not replace the job, but somebody using it will.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Amazon, what Amazon done with AI and just big data, going back years ago, they take this huge amount of data going from, not only are they looking at your views on your, what you're looking at on the internet, they're also taking your clicks and your click-throughs and all that kind of information when you're on their site, and they're prescribing what you should see. So Jennifer, you'll have a different look when you go to Amazon than Andrew will.
Yep.
Because of your interests. That's all about artificial intelligence, all about, hey, how do I give the client the information they want to see without a bunch of other news, just garbage, if you will. Right. So it's really taking and narrowing the focus of what you want to see that's relevant to you so you can make quick decisions. That's the magic of AI.
Intent data is real.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to our rapid fire questions now, Jace. First, is there a book, movie, or TV series that inspires you when you're thinking about the future of manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the book Grit, right? So Grit's the power of passion and perseverance. Angela Duckworth, she's the author of it. And that kind of epitomizes operations, right? And unless you have grit, don't go to operations. You got to have passion for what you do. You got to just go power through the issues. And, in the end, that's what wins the day. Another book or books that I really like is when I look at Navy SEALs and I look at their grit and how they approach problems, adapt and improvise, right? The leadership traits of Navy SEALs is a book that I read, and I think it's phenomenal. That in itself says, one, never say never. They never give up. They are disciplined, they're smart, and they have grit, right? If you have a challenge, what do? 4 paws up? Heck no. You're going to go off and you're going to figure out a way, right? That's operations.
Which leader or innovator in technology or engineering do you admire greatly, and why?
Elon Musk. So I think he's brilliant, very disciplined in what he does. He's relentless in his pursuit for perfection, and he has an amazing vision, constantly challenging norms, basically taking norms and saying, forget it, right? That whole innovation. He's a thought leader in pretty much everything he does in and outside of technology, and the innovation that he's created and the value he's created to humanity is second to none.
What's a piece of technology outside of manufacturing that's had great impact on your life or really inspired you?
The web, right? Just to be able to go on, sit down. And, I grew up in the day of, I had a calculator. I had, when I was young, black and white TV. You don't remember that, right? But going from dial telephones and, being able to pick up a phone, now you can walk around with the phone, and now you have the power of information and AI at your fingertips. That is what is amazing for me in technology.
If you could instantly acquire any new skill or knowledge in any area, what would it be?
Physics. I don't know physics. I think physics is obviously the root of what we are and how we approach the world, and, understanding what we think are today's limits with physics, and then saying, what can I do different? Why is that the barrier that we think today in physics? How do I work on breaking through that barrier, right? And I don't have that depth of understanding, but I think if I did, that would be fun.
Jace, I guess to close us out, this has been an absolutely amazing interview. In a few words, if there were some young professionals coming into operations here in the room, what advice would you give them on how to start out today?
Ask a lot of questions, right? Learn what you don't know or don't understand. Spend the time. Get involved in no matter what you're doing, right? If someone tells you something, you'll probably forget. They show you something, you might remember, but if you get involved, you'll understand, right? And that's a key thing. Take risks, right? You don't improve, you don't grow unless you take risks. You'll fail. That's okay. And don't let security be a thief of your ambition, right? A lot of times people go off and they just want to be secure. You will end up not taking chances or challenges and end up looking back going, man, I wish I've done that, and I just didn't because I was afraid.
Jace, this was phenomenal. I enjoyed this so much. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here.
No, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I think, what you guys are doing, and AI, I'm excited for the future. I want to be involved in the future because I think it's transformational.
I wish for more of your success. I wish for more young people to follow in your footsteps. So thanks for being an inspiration.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.